Circumstances intervened last week to prevent me from being with you, and I apologize. I was particularly sorry to miss the forum, but we'll have it again. And believe me, you can call at any time and ask me any question you want. So we haven't lost the opportunity to have that kind of interaction. But did you miss the mirth moments? That's the point. I have an excellent mirth moment here given by a member of the congregation. A minister was completing a temperance sermon. How long since you heard one of those? And with great emphasis he said, "Brothers and sisters, if I had all the beer in the world, I'd take it and pour it in the river." And sweating profusely, and with even greater emphasis, "Brothers and sisters, if I had all the wine in the world, I would take it and pour it in the river." And then finally, shaking his fist in the air, "If I had all the whiskey in the world, I would take it and pour it in the river." Then he sat down, exhausted, streaming with perspiration. And the song leader got up and announced, "For our closing hymn, brothers and sisters, we shall sing 365, Shall We Gather at the River?" The perils. A couple of one-liners, very quick here. These are the kinds of things that people say after a regrettable car accident. Some of us have had such a misfortune, and sometimes we are not entirely coherent in our responses. Some of the responses that were given after a car collision: "The other car collided with mine without giving warning of its intentions." "I collided with a stationary truck coming the other way." "The guy was all over the road. I had to swerve a number of times before I managed to hit him." "An invisible car came out of nowhere, struck my vehicle, and vanished." Sort out the logic on that one. Okay, keep them coming. Jesus says in Matthew 18:2, "Unless ye become as little children, ye shall in no wise inherit the kingdom of heaven." Remember that, because I want to come back to it later. What I want to do is this morning to share a few comments with you about the Lenten season in which we find ourselves. Lent comes from the old Middle English word for springtime, lente, Lenten. And originally in the church calendar, it was designed to prepare people for the great Easter Mass, the huge celebration of Jesus' resurrection. And it was thought fitting that before people participated in that great event, they should undergo some kind of letting go. And this Lenten practice, of course, has continued for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years in the Christian church. Sometimes people remember that Jesus went apart before entering Jerusalem to pray, and the Lenten message is sometimes designed to accompany this notion of going apart and cleansing oneself in preparation for the great Easter Mass. Well, I have to tell you, and I've told you this before, I was brought up in what might charitably be called a pagan family. My mother and father, and Carol knew them both, they were lovely pagans, weren't they? Sweet folk. We didn't sacrifice or chop trees down or anything, or dance at midnight when the full moon. In fact, my mother was a natural psychic. She had a remarkable capacity to see visions, as it were. But neither my mother nor my father really frequented church. So consequently, I didn't go to church when I was a little boy. I stand before you, as it were, unshriven. Not shriveled, but unshriven. And I didn't know what Lent was all about. And people would sometimes say to me, well, what did you give up for Lent? And I would say nothing. And then, of course, in my day, of course, children were not treated so imaginatively as they are today. And I was looked upon with distinct disapproval. That child, it was Dickensian, that child has not given up anything for Lent. Wicked child. Well, I didn't know what to give up. Now, I learned later on that in Lent, people did give up something. Usually something like chocolate cake or visits to the movies or something of that sort. It was always something very tangible, very palpable, very physical that they gave up. It didn't sound at all appealing to me. I continued to indulge myself throughout Lent, and as a result, I'm sure suffered something. But I didn't really know what Lent was. And when I came into Unity, I discovered that we had a very well-developed notion of Lent, and of the notion to give something up for Lent. In fact, our co-founder, Charles Fillmore, wrote a book entitled Keep a True Lent. Some of you may even have it. Some of you may follow it along. But what excited me most of all when I discovered this was that, lo and behold, in Unity, you don't have to give up something tangible like chocolate cake. You give up something in consciousness, something that has been dragging you down and that you need to let go of before you can continue to move forward. And I understood also at that time this wonderful notion that we have in Unity about denial and affirmation. Of course, we all love affirmation. Everybody loves affirmation because it's so positive. It's such fun. We're always affirming something that we want to come into our lives. So we love that side of the equation. But sometimes we forget that denial and affirmation are sides of a coin, as it were. Affirmation is great, but sometimes you have to prepare the way through denial. And the Lenten season was an ideal time, a great opportunity, a perfect place in consciousness to practice the notion of denial, to get rid of what it is that sometimes drags us down, holds us back, prevents us from moving forward as we should. And so I've always looked upon Lent, since I came into Unity, as an opportunity for letting go something that has accompanied me that I don't want in consciousness, in my thinking processes, in my mind, because it holds me down, draws me back. We all have our own nemeses, as it were. We all have our own thoughts and feelings that quite properly we don't want to share with others. But privately we realize hold us back and draw us down, prevent us from moving forward as freely as we may. And sometimes we cling to these thoughts. They become ingrained in us. Sometimes events that occurred in our early lives continue to persist in our adult lives, in consciousness, in our thinking, and assume a proportion out of all reality. Sometimes an event that happened to us when we were 8, 10, 12, 15 is still troubling us when we're 50, 60, 70. And yet, the anguish or the frustration we may feel at that latter age bears no comparison, perhaps, to the original event as it occurred. It's almost as though we continue to blow air into a balloon with our thoughts and feelings. When we should have released something a long time ago, we carry it with us. And with every rehearsal in consciousness, in thinking, that effect seems to grow larger and more compelling. And yet we have the capacity to let go. We have the capacity to let go. And I always think Lent is that ideal time to deny the power of something over us. I don't know. You may be one of those wonderful people who have never been troubled in your earthly existence whatsoever. You have moved through it like the true, cherished child of life. You've never been bothered, pestered, upset, angry, frustrated, you name it. It's been a wonderful ride. And how I praise you. You can go and get the coffee now if you want. I think it's already ready. For the rest of us, mere mortals, okay. I'm not going to tell you what burdens I carry with me mentally in consciousness. None of your business. And unless you want to come and counsel with me, it's none of my business. But I would say, learn the lesson of denial. It's not that we're saying these never happened. A lot of people misinterpret the notion of denial. They say, oh, well, we're just denying that something ever happened. Something unpleasant happened to me, that I've got this unpleasant thought running through my mind. We're not saying that at all. What we're saying is those thoughts and feelings, those negative states of consciousness which we may endure and suffer and which may distort our very consciousness itself, they're there, but they don't have necessary power over us. We can deny the hold of these feelings. When I was starting out in the academic world, I thought I'd become a psychologist. I didn't, I don't think. But I remember being told that at the age of 18, our psyches, our emotions, we would say in Unity, our consciousness, is fixed. There's nothing you can do about it. If you're a pain at 18, you're going to be a pain at 80. There's nothing you can do in between to change all of this. Frankly, friends, I think in political discourse now we've opened the way to frank speech, but I would say, quite frankly, that is BS. I have seen people change their entire approach to existence, to living, to consciousness over a period of time through using denial, by refusing to accept the power of some negative emotion or experience over their existence. It can be done. Now, I'm sure there are some cases that don't respond, or some people who don't want to respond, but it can be done. And I always think Lent is the ideal time to accomplish this. And you may say, well, okay, what are some of these states of mind that we might want to get rid of? I don't know, they're legion, aren't they? Let's pick one out of the air. Envy. How about envy? Envy is one of the 7 deadly sins, isn't it? The other ones, oh yes, anger, lust. I prefer the word concupiscence. So I don't get to use that very often. Isn't it a lovely ring to it, concupiscence? The kind of thing President Carter admitted to in Playboy. Concupiscence. Anyway, well, there are others too, but envy always stood out to me because, quite frankly, over the years, a lot of the people who come to talk to me have been troubled by envy. They've seen others get ahead of them. They've seen others enjoy benefits that they couldn't achieve. They're not satisfied with their lives, and so they envy those who have done better. It's a natural human propensity. I think we all tend to go there. Cain and Abel are supposed to be the first examples of envy between brothers in that instance. So we do envy, not maliciously necessarily, but sometimes there's that sense of envy, especially in today's world, alas, where there are such tragic distinctions between what people can achieve, what they can accomplish, and, let's say, the rest of us. It goes hand in hand, I suppose, with disappointment, which is something else that troubles people greatly. But envy, to me, is something that can be dismissed. It can be dealt with. And, of course, this time of year, this time of Lenten disavowal is an ideal opportunity to accomplish that, to get free of envy, because when you think about it, what does envy do? It diminishes our natures, doesn't it? Other people don't really diminish us. We diminish ourselves. That's one of the great tragedies of life that I've discovered over the many years that I've lived with and counseled with people. That the very worst diminishes diminishers of our existence are not others, but ourselves. We are the ones who say, oh no, they're doing better than we are. They're managing better than we are. So consequently, we're not up to it. So on and so on and so on and so on. It's like the story of the beggar in the street who saw his college roommate drive by in a Rolls Royce, and he said, "There, but for the grace of me, go I." We have to find satisfaction in who and what we are as children of God. We have to discover the innate dignity that gives us worth and meaning and being as creatures of God. And I think sometimes envy and all the accompanying frustrations that go with it demean and diminish that beautiful vision that God has for each one of us. We ourselves tend to import this horror, and we drag ourselves down as a result. So I don't know whether any of you are troubled by envy or not, as again, I say that's none of my business, but maybe you are. Now is the time to get rid of that wretched and pernicious and highly negative state of mind by denying it, telling it it's not wanted, it's not necessary. You have within yourself the right to the purpose and meaning and dignity that God has given us all. There's another I can pull out of the air. Unforgiveness. People who come to talk to me very often discuss unforgiveness. They haven't been able to forgive something that was done to them 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago. Well, I understand that. When somebody does something unpleasant to us, physically abusive or mentally, we don't like that, and neither should we. But sometimes we hold on to that unpleasant experience. We allow it, as it were, to fester within consciousness. And I have met people frequently who are still troubled, who often have problems sleeping because of an event that occurred 20, 30, 40 years ago. They're still rehearsing it in consciousness. Maybe the individual who visited this impropriety upon them is long dead. I don't know. But still in their hearts and minds, it nags and nags and nags and gnaws, and they feel the pain and the suffering of uncertainty and of diminution within themselves. These are the kinds of things that we can get rid of during Lent. Now, I used that quote from Matthew a little earlier. Jesus says, "Unless ye become as little children, ye shall in no wise inherit the kingdom of heaven." Where is the kingdom of heaven? Within ourselves. Sometimes it's said that we are within a broader kingdom of heaven, but ostensibly and literally, and as far as unity is concerned, believably, the kingdom of heaven is within us. That place of grace, that place where we are necessary, where we are needed as children of God. That domain of the Spirit, which is the true resting place of the heart. That's within us. But unless we become as little children, he says, we don't get in there. Now, that passage is part of a broader passage that is susceptible of broader interpretation. That I freely concede. But those words in particular have always stood out in my recollection. Of course, little children have nasty thoughts. Little children can be mean and bullying and unpleasant to one another. Their moods can be ugly. We know this. But essentially, they are, as it were, freshly minted souls. We won't talk about life before birth, which I'd love to do at some point, but I'm not going to do it this morning. Thank goodness. But they are, as it were, freshly minted souls insofar as they have come into this world. And there is a certain purity of intent about what they think and do. When we grow up, our thoughts, as we know, become more convoluted, more Byzantine, if you will. Our thoughts become more difficult to cleanse. They are less simple. When you think of a little child, the small child, that child knows pretty much exactly what it wants. It wants love, it wants attention, it wants nourishment, it wants shelter, all perfectly respectable things that any soul, any body would want. And so he's telling us, in a sense, cleanse yourself of all the accretions of time, of all the pain and the suffering and the frustration and the bitterness that may have built up in your soul, because these will inhibit you and prevent you from entering that wonderful state of bliss that we call the kingdom of heaven. The more baggage we can let go, the freer we are, the more likely it is that we shall enter that state of bliss. Now, we can argue about where that is, when that is, and everything else. These are metaphysical truths and should be taken as such. But this is an ideal time. Lent is an ideal time for us to become again as little children. Let go of so much that we have accumulated in the last 30, 40, 50, 60. I don't know how old is the oldest person in this sanctuary. We don't talk about age in Unity, so nobody should put their hands up. If they did, I probably wouldn't be here. This is an ideal time to let go of anything that has troubled our souls, drawn us down and back over the years. Now is the moment to say, this doesn't have necessary power over me. I deny its hold on me, whether it's unforgiveness, envy, anything else, even concupiscence, which is now apparently a necessary accompaniment of growth. But that's all beside the point. Now is the moment to let go of what has held us back. This wonderful opportunity we have once a year as we prepare for the symbolic resurrection of who we are. We let go of anything that would hold us back. All that drags us down, we let it go, and we use denial. We use denial to help us to achieve that, because we're getting ready to affirm our capacity to resurrect. Anything that wishes to grow, anything that wishes to sprout forth in spring needs to be pruned. My son and my dear wife are at this moment pruning our garden on the island so that what we have there may burst into newness of life. But there's a lot of dead wood that needs to be cut away. Lent is the time to do that. Denial is the practice that achieves it. Now I'll sit down.